everybody, I'm Bree the Plant Lady, checking in with a weekly garden tour. It's the last day of February and I am just back from a great weekend in Springfield, Missouri, where I had the opportunity to give 3 presentations at the 32nd Annual Home and Garden Show. Now it was very chilly. It had snowed and there was a lot of ice, and I didn't get to explore the town as much as I would have liked, but I have faith that I'll get to go back sometime during the warmer season. Now, I am going to start adjusting my weekly garden tours to come on Mondays because I actually have travel scheduled every weekend through the end of May. There's a lot that's been happening here in my garden in my absence because the temperatures have been really mild. So let's go for a walk and see all that's blooming this week on the last day of February. Well, I was hoping to catch Chris and Prudy, but I don't think they're home right now. But I wanted to show you an update from the raised beds that we did here about 2 weeks ago, and my cover crops are totally starting to germinate. Let me give you an up-close view. So if you remember, this is the bed that Chris and I split in half, and I hand weeded this area and pulled the weeds out from the root, and he just tilled his in. So let's look at his first. Look, those weeds, they're all starting to grow again. And so the till-in method doesn't work because the plants will continue to grow. You have to pull them out from the root. And if you do this, they're gonna go to seed and then you're gonna have another generation grow. In contrast, you see over here, there's very few weeds coming, totally manageable to come through and, get a few things that I missed, just like that. But you'll be able to see here, I planted spring wheat, buckwheat, daikon radish, and I thought I did a 4th thing. I'm gonna have to go back and look at that video. But I do see three distinct things germinating here. Pull that off, these daikons are doing great. Actually, I think the other thing was here. And I don't remember what I sowed. And I don't see anything special germinating in here. Actually, I do. I did carrots, didn't I? And there they are. They're starting to sprout. So this is gonna be a pretty cool thing to see. I'm really happy with how my side looks on this bed. And soon we're gonna actually be planting potatoes in here. That was the goal. We're gonna do potatoes around the edge because that will help prevent animals from eating inside this bed. Now I'm looking over here at Prudy's bed and I see that there is a parade of cats. They definitely believe that every yard is their yard. There's no boundaries for these kitties. And Prudy's garden looks awesome. I can't believe how big the poppies have gotten in the last 2 weeks. Look at these. These, remember, are self-sown. Cubby apparently owns this raised bed as well. It's his territory. There's little babe, David, over there at the pickleball court. And that top dress of soil cube is really doing its job. Now remember, today is the last day of February. It's the last day for the big sale of soil cube. You'll save $30 on every big yellow bag if you order before midnight tonight. It's a great deal. I know, I got mine ordered. I have several big bags on their way. And I just couldn't resist showing you all of these flowers on my favorite. This is a Higo called Happy. And Higo camellias were actually the camellias of samurai. They were frequently planted at their graves because the flowers, when they fall, they actually fall off whole, they don't shatter. And they were selected to have these single layer of petals with these large kind of bundles of stamens that look like sunshines. There are over 200 varieties of Higo camellias, and it's definitely something that I would highly recommend starting a collection of. I think they're extraordinary. And this is a pretty little scene with all of the fallen flowers of crimson candles and these beautiful double hellebores that are planted underneath. Here is one that's sort of a purple tinge, and this is like a all cream. But you see, these still hang down and they're really difficult to see. So this is why I like, you know, cutting these flowers off and putting them into floating arrangements so I can actually see them and enjoy them. I'm not worried about these doubles being seedy. I mean, I guess in a way I should leave some. Maybe I'd get some seedlings. But they're really just a plant that benefits from, you know, pulling that flower off and floating so that you will actually see the blooms. Oh, the fragrance just hit me like a ton of bricks. It's so amazing. And you can see these flowers are really fully open now. They're so extraordinary. I just love Edgeworthia so much. And certainly over the past week, all the terrible news coming from the Ukraine, though I know that sunflowers are their national flower, basically anytime I see a yellow flower against a blue sky, it just reminds me to do whatever I can, which I don't know what I can do really. However, my favorite seed supplier, Baker Creek Heirloom Seed, is currently running a special for raising funds for Ukrainian refugees. All seed sales are going to support the refugees from Ukraine. So please indulge in buying some seeds from Baker Creek. Their website is rareseeds.com. Speaking of Baker Creek, these kohlrabis were seed from them. And these, you know, I planted last fall, and I think because of weather, they didn't really form the proper kohlrabi, their stem, but they're still alive, and some are starting to swell a little better than others. Like this one is looking pretty good. I grow kohlrabi, one, because I love eating it, but also because it reminds me of my grandfather, who was an immigrant from Czechoslovakia. Well, look what is starting to bloom. The Mount Aso Salix, the pink Japanese pussy willow, which I can't get my phone to really focus on. You can see all these catkins, and when you see the yellow, those are the stamens. That is when it's actually starting to put out pollen. This is a plant that I actually won at a Master Gardener event in Princeton, New Jersey. I think it back in 2019. And I just can't believe how great this willow has done. And people have asked, you know, about its root system. And, you know, I planted it here on purpose so that it would help stabilize this bank and absorb extra moisture, you know, to prevent water from going into the garage. Willows are really great for their water remediation capacity, but you definitely want to plant it somewhere where it gets extra moisture so that you don't have to supplement the irrigation. And overall, this corner, everything is looking lush and nice because it has been quite mild. You know, while it was 13 degrees where I was, it was 78 here. So you can see the clumps of barley that were planted early. These were the first barleys that I planted in the fall. Have really gotten some nice size. And all of these things, the poppies and larkspur, the Schultzia, or the California poppies, are doing quite well. You know, soon, really like in a month, it'll be amazing to see week by week now how the garden changes as the days get so much longer and temperatures really start to rise consistently. This is definitely my favorite time of year. Now, speaking of my favorite things, grains, and look at these grains now. Boy, I can't even imagine how big they would be if I had just originally put them here. I'll tell you all, I haven't watered these at all. I have not pulled a hose out since I moved these. So we have been getting sufficient water, and these are of course planted directly in soil cubes, so that stays wet longer, reducing my maintenance. And I actually have a new blog for them that I'll link in this description, talking about why I don't use peat moss and why I exclusively garden in soil cube, both in the ground and in pots. These grains are a great example of how well plants perform. And we are making lots of plans for our 2022 grain experiences down at Johnson Nursery. And I just need to see if they've gotten the website up and running so that I can start giving you more details and dates and ways to actually attend one of those events. Overall, everything planted, all these containers in the fire pit bed look great. So many flowers. I love this, cut leaf mustard here. And this green cut leaf mustard is really quite wonderful. I'm so happy that they have rebounded after we got cold back in January. And look at all that arugula that's flowering. And that'll be, setting seed, and it'll self-sow. And then I'll continue to have this great stand of delicious spicy arugula for salads on a regular basis. Now let's check out these pots. These, remember, some of them are direct sown poppies and others have potatoes in them, and I don't remember which pots have what. I'm not seeing, oh, yes I am. This has poppies. More poppies here. These are both containers from Root Maker, and I especially love these for growing tomatoes in. Remember, these were all filled with tomatoes last summer, and I just cut the stalks down and then direct seeded on top of that. I didn't add more soil. I didn't dump the old soil out. I'm a strong believer that you don't have to discard your soil every year unless you have a disease issue. And I do not have any disease problems, so I'm not going to just squander the compost that's in these containers. I don't see any potato development yet, but I do see quite a bit of poppy germination. So I do have poppies growing on both fences, and it'll be exciting to see, the timeline on each, because these got planted back in December. The other fence didn't get done until the beginning of January. You see this bag, especially here in the sunniest spot, has really good germination. Look around to the shady areas and there's not a lot germinating. Sunlight is a big factor in the development of the poppy seed plants. Well, it's super cheerful to see daffodils blooming, and I do love to cut them and bring them inside. And you can see the phlox that I mowed down a few weeks ago is growing very rapidly. And in that also are gladiolus that are popping up from something. I think I planted gladiolus somewhere like 10 years ago. And they are a very reliable bulb that miraculously the voles don't tend to devour. And I really just can't believe how everything has jumped in just a week's time. This time of year is so exciting. You can really see how tall the garlic along the edge has gotten. And of course the Ms. America is so beautiful. And then these poppies are doing really wonderfully. That barley that had really taken a beating in the cold of January is rebounded. And the broccolis, look at these that I trimmed back because their heads were damaged. They are all starting to sprout from side shoots. And the fall planted sweet peas. Look at how much new growth they have developed in just the last 7 days. So extraordinary. Now remember, with sweet peas, they have tendrils and they will actually attach themselves. The vines themselves don't actually wind. It's the tendrils that get attached to the cattle fence panel. While we're here on the back porch, you'll see it's time for me to redo these floating arrangements. The floating arrangements don't last as long when it's warm out. They're really great for cold, and that's why I don't do these at all in the summer. Not at all. Like, first of all, you'd have a lot of mosquitoes, and you'd have to basically do them every single day. So this is a winter activity for me. And next to that are the broccoli and cabbage trays that I sowed, I think about 3 weeks ago. And they still have mostly cotyledon leaves. That's this. And I think it's time for me to actually give them their first dose of fertilizer, which I will do in a separate video so that you will have it as a reference as I discuss my very strong opinions about all the different fertilizers that are available and why I choose the ones that I use. Now, another container that I sowed during my top 5 plants for February. This is the Wildfire lettuce mix that I sowed in that video. And you can see here we are not even a week later and the lettuce is germinated. And that again is planted directly in soil cube in this awesome crescent garden container that has the ability to hold a bunch of water. I don't have it filled for this time of year because we're still a little bit cold, but in the summer, you actually fill water here and then it self-waters from underneath. It really will help lower your maintenance for irrigating. I was so excited when I opened my back door and looked out to see my star magnolia, Magnolia stellata, in full flower. I've unfortunately pruned this to the point where all of the flowers are way above my head and I can't really get a decent picture of a bloom up close. So I'm like, I'm gonna need to get a ladder out because I really need it for some slideshows that I have coming up. But this is just such a beautiful plant, definitely one of the symbols that spring is soon arriving. So we make our way around the north side of the house. I've had some people ask about the amount of sunlight that this side receives, and you can see it's in full shade. In the winter, this doesn't really get any direct sunlight at all. But in the summer, when the sun is higher in the sky, it will get about 4 or 5 hours of direct light, which is ideal for camellias setting flower buds. So you see the Jax isn't quite open yet, but look at how many flower buds there are. That's because of the exposure that this gets in the summer. Remember, camellias set flower buds on that spring growth in the middle of summer. So if you need to prune a camellia, you need to do it right after it flowers. If you cut off that new growth, you're cutting off the wood that will provide blooms for the next season. Now you can see there's a ton of hellebore flowers that are still coming on, and you know, it's hard to believe that like at least twice a week I pick every single bloom off for floating arrangements, and there's still this many flowers. I really do love hellebores. And one of my favorites, I've been waiting with just extreme anticipation for the Distilleum to start to bloom, and it's just starting to initiate flower buds. I'm gonna actually do a special feature on this. I love using these branches for cut flower arrangements. I bet that I will be able to start using these this week. Oh, you guys, something very exciting. The very first 2 blooms, no, 3 blooms, of my favorite red. This is Royal Velvet, and I just think it's the most exquisite. Oh, I love it so much. I'm so excited. Oh, what a treat. The garden is always just such a wonderful welcome home. Very exciting season to look forward to. Okay, I've been saying for a month, I have got to get this phlox cut down. It is on my to-do list for today. And look here, these are crocus that I planted last fall. There's a video showing me doing this, and with that also are grape hyacinths. Of course, this is vetch. Oh, the bane of my spring existence. Sweet little hyacinths blooming, grape hyacinths, and crocuses mixed in, of course, with the Wildfire lettuce and garlic along the edge. More crocus blooming here. This border, I think, is the best it's ever been. I am just so excited about all the poppies and the larkspur that are developing. And that window box has been, you know, it stayed green. I water it like once a month. That is Carex cherokeensis, and I really love it. My plan is to actually plant that in the garden, probably in the new garden next door, and then through the summer that will be planted with all succulents. It's a little early still because we definitely can still have cold temperatures through March. Now over to the front border, you'll really be able to notice how many daffodils I planted in here. And they are already getting ready to start to bloom. Look at that. This is going to be really quite showy. And the spring flowers that were direct seeded in here are growing rapidly at this stage. You can definitely see hoof prints. The deer have been walking through, and the cats have been busy digging. I think that the voles are very active right now. And you know, in years past I've had hundreds of tulips in here. I don't see nearly as many tulips coming. You know, there's some poking up here and there. I don't know that they'll flower. Tulips are not always reliably perennial, but as I mentioned in another garden tour, Becky from Brent and Becky's Bulbs told me that if you cut the flowers off, that allows more energy to go into the bulb. So then they are more likely to be perennial. Now, another really exciting thing that I saw as soon as I got up today was that my first anemones are blooming. And I have included a link to a blog that I've recently written about growing these. And I do have a video that I posted last fall of when I planted these. And I just think they are such a beautiful flower. They're actually really great as cuts. And I think that they're starting to bloom now. Last year they bloomed all the way until the end of April. So this is the first of many flowers. Now the warm weather has made these cutleaf mustards start to bolt, which is great because that provides nectar for pollinators that are active now. These aren't quite open, but they will be in the coming days. And of course the violas, which I featured as a top 5 plant for February, are just so cheerful and so reliable. I adore them. They really look great now with the milder temperatures. And the wall of barley is doing really well, but I do think it's time for me to get this fertilized. So that will be included in my upcoming fertilizer video that will go out this week. Overall, I am really excited to come out here tomorrow morning and drink my coffee in this cozy little spot in our driveway. So out here in the side property border, I wanted to show you, these are some new hellebores that were introduced for the purpose, dual purpose. They were supposed to be totally sterile, which they're not, but that's okay. But they're also up facing. So, you know, these are really nice because you can actually enjoy them when you walk past because the flowers aren't nodding down. However, the sterility thing, someone wrote to me, there are sterile hellebores out there. That's actually not entirely true. There are varieties that have been bred to not be as fertile, but there are none that are 100% sterile. And this is the perfect example. So, you know, I had just one plant here, and in years past I didn't harvest the flowers for the purpose of floating. Well, if you notice here, I've got a plant here and a bunch of seedlings here, another one here, here. Look, tiny baby seedlings. This would be like last year's seedlings. So even the ones that are said to be sterile aren't totally sterile. And that's okay. I don't mind them spreading around a little, but I do want you to be aware that hellebores have the capacity to be invasive. And I want you to make good decisions about the plants that you incorporate in your landscape and not face challenges from growing things in an irresponsible manner. And as we come along the side fence line, let's see what's happening. Well, I see buds swelling on this peach, so that should be opening relatively soon. I have a lot of weeds to still deal with in here, but I am seeing quite a few bachelor buttons germinating. That is right there. And look at all of those poppies. Holy smokes. If you remember 2 weeks ago, I was like, this border is a disaster, nothing's germinating. Just have a little faith. These poppies sown the first week of January are now completely doing their jobs. I am so relieved. Holy cow. I definitely need to spend some time out here though, cleaning out the weeds. lots of weeds in here. And this is also where I did a late planting of garlic. This was the elephant garlic. And I'm really pleased to show you that that is now starting to grow. Now generally I recommend planting garlic in the fall, but I did this again in early January, and here they are starting to develop. Sophia approved. And as I make my way back here, I'm really pleased to see these poppies are growing really well, and you'll notice there is no digging, and that is because of the cattle fence. The cats walk through here, but they don't dig. So this is a really simple solution. I recommend the cattle fence or something bigger like this versus netting, because animals, specifically things like snakes and birds, get caught in netting and can die. Nobody's gonna die from this cattle fence panel. And once they're established enough, like once they really start to get larger, I can just pull it up, and then I can put the cattle fence back in as a low edge to help prevent rabbits very specifically, but also to deter, you know, kitties and dogs. We actually originally cut these pieces to help keep the dogs, my neighbor's dogs, from going into their landscape beds, and it worked really well. There are a ton of camellias that are coming into action. This is one of my favorites, Tama Americana. I'm a little disappointed to see how many of the flowers have reverted to solid. They are supposed to have this kind of white pickety edge. This is what they're supposed to look like. Many of the blooms are solid pink. They're still pretty, but you know, the cultivar is supposed to have a white edge. Finally, over here, you can really see these poppies have grown a lot in just a week. These are the ones that were directly seeded in these soil cube bags back in early January. Here are some more willows that I had actually brought inside for flower arrangement. They rooted and I just stuck them in this pot. And oh yeah, they're fully rooted. And over here, I wanted to show you two new camellias that have just burst into flower. This is Roma resorta, the variety that is responsible for my obsession with heritage camellias. Tons of flowers coming on that. I bought this as a 1-gallon plant at Camellia Forest 2 years ago. So it's grown really well. And right here, this is Stellar Sunrise. This is the solid pink form of April Dawn, which is a zone 6 hardy variety. And you know, as these open more and more, it's a beautiful formal double with these cupped petals. I just think it's an extraordinary plant, and again, with tons of blooms. And that again is because of this orientation, winter shade, but brighter summer exposure. Because remember, summer exposure is what results in good flower set on camellias. Not full sun, but at least a few hours of direct light. I hope you've enjoyed today's garden tour. Like I mentioned in the beginning, I'm going to be shifting these to post on Mondays to accommodate my travel schedule through the spring season. And I do look forward to sharing updates regularly, because this is the time of year when so much change happens in a really short period of time. Now, if you're interested in catching me along my travels this spring, you can visit my website, breegrows.com, and go to the upcoming events tab, which is where I have all of the venues posted. And if you want to keep in touch, you can also sign up for my monthly newsletter, which will go out tomorrow on March 1st. We'll keep you up to date with all the things that I have going on in my garden and beyond. Thanks so much for watching, everybody.